So I wanted to start off with a question. How many of you guys have ever wanted to be an influencer before? I'm pretty sure we all do, deep down. If you haven't said yes, then you're lying. So I grew up in kind of the generation where becoming a YouTuber was starting to become a career, where, you started to see people, they were making a little bit of money, they were buying bigger houses, they were getting paid to travel, sponsorships, that kind of thing. And I thought, that looks really cool. Like, getting paid to film my life, that sounds awesome. I would love to do that. And so at the young age of 13, I decided that I wanted to become a YouTuber. And so I started a YouTube channel, a vlog channel. I had my little blue digital camera, and I'd bring it everywhere I went, and I'd pull it out on the SkyTrain, be like, "What's up, guys?" And I was convinced that I was going to become famous. I was convinced that one of my videos was going to go viral, and I actually got up to, guys, 41 subscribers. So, I know. And just because I love you guys and I love to embarrass myself, I've done it many times, I decided that I'm going to show you a little clip. This is the intro that I made for all my vlogs. And so, Jolo, why don't you show them what it is? Wow. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I put a lot of effort into that video. The door opening, going into life with Avery, I was really proud of that. And yes, it was great quality, as you guys can see. Unfortunately, I privated all those videos, so if you go on YouTube, you're not gonna find them. But, you have that clip to remember, so there you go. Now, obviously, this didn't work out as a career path for me. I'm not a YouTuber. I actually went to Summit. I went to Bible college instead. So that was the career that I chose. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll get back at it again and we'll be famous. But there's something enticing about being an influencer, right? There's something that just seems so cool about being able to have an influence over other people. The fact that people want to know what it is that you have to say, that they want to try the same products that you have, that they want to go to the same places that you go to. We all kind of want that, right? We want to have that influence over other people. Right now, we're in a series called Verified. And this is all about what it means to be verified by God, to have that check mark beside your name. And I'm pretty sure that most of us deep down, when we look at those celebrities who have that blue check mark beside their name, we kind of want that, right? We kind of want to be verified. But what if I told you that you actually already have one? That in Christ, you already are verified. That in his books, you are an influencer. And that's not just a cheesy saying, guys. That's actually true. But the thing about being an influencer is that you can either use it for good or for bad. You can have a positive influence on people, or you can actually have a pretty negative influence on people. And today I want to look at some examples in the Bible of people who use their influence for good or for bad. And I want to start off by looking at someone named Delilah. Everyone say Delilah. Now, Delilah was an example of a bad influence. If you've heard about Samson before, we actually talked about him at Moore Conference. But Samson is this guy in the Bible who had incredible strength. I'm not just talking like he goes to the gym a lot and, he's like an Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, this guy could tear apart lions. He killed thousands of people at once. He was super strong. And this was a gift that God had given him from birth. God called him to defeat the Philistine army, who were the enemies of the Israelites, and he said, I want you to defeat them, so I'm going to give you this strength, this calling on your life. And so that's why Samson had this strength. But if you know the end of the story, you know that it doesn't end well for Samson and that he actually has a bit of a downfall. And part of this is to do with Delilah. See, Delilah was this woman, she was from the Valley of Sorek. And so the Valley of Sorek was kind of in between the Jerusalem territory and the Philistine territory. So it was kind of neutral. You weren't really on either side. But the point is that Delilah was not a Jew. And part of Samson's vow was that he could only be with someone who was a Jew. But nevertheless, Samson meets Delilah and he falls in love with her. She must have been really good looking or something. And she's the one for him, apparently. But see, the Philistines, the enemies of Israel, they're a little bit frustrated with Samson. He just keeps defeating them over and over and over again, and they want to get rid of them. So you know who they go to? They go to Delilah. They say, hey, Delilah, we know that you have an in with Samson here. We know that you have a little bit of influence over his life. Do you think that maybe you could find out the secret to his strength? Do you think that maybe you could get that information for us? And if you do, we'll pay you. We'll actually give you, it says 100 days worth of wages. Can you imagine not having to work for 100 days? Someone just gives you the money straight there. I would take that for sure. And so Delilah, she takes the bribe and she goes to Samson and she asks him, Samson, what is the secret to your strength? Just tell me. I won't tell anybody else, I promise. And Samson, the first time, he knows, she's probably just playing with me. He says, okay, fine. If you tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings, then I'll be as weak as any other man. And so Samson goes to sleep. Delilah ties him with 7 fresh bowstrings. She calls the Philistines. The Philistines come. They try to take over him, but he wakes up and he's just as strong as ever. So the next day, Delilah goes to Samson and she's like, okay, you tricked me. No more lies, okay? Tell me why it is that you're actually so strong. Tell me the secret to your strength. And he says, okay, I'm done playing. If you tie me with new ropes, then I will be as weak as any other man. And so again, he goes to sleep. Delilah comes, she ties him with new ropes, calls the Philistines in. The Philistines come, they try to take him, but no, he wakes up, he breaks the ropes, he's too strong for them. Then a third time, Delilah goes to him. She says, why are you lying to me, Samson? I thought we were close. Don't worry, I'm not going to tell anybody. She says, how are you so strong? He says, fine, okay. If you tie my hair, he has these 7 braids on his head. He said, if you tie my hair into the fabric of a loom, then I will be as weak as any other man. So again, he goes to sleep. Delilah ties up his hair in this loom. The Philistines come, they try to take him, but no, he's too strong once again. Now you would think at this point that maybe Samson would pick up on the fact that Delilah's ratting him out. Like you would think that, okay, he tells her a secret and then that exact thing happens. Like you'd think he would connect the dots a little bit. But either he was just really dumb, his strength made up for it, or he just didn't care. He was too in love. Either way, Delilah comes to him a 4th time. And at this time, she's desperate. She's probably thinking, the Philistines, they're getting frustrated with me. I still haven't come through on my promise. I really want to get this paycheck. I have to convince him to tell me the truth. And so she uses her conniving little ways to get to him. Read what it says in Judges 16. It says, then Delilah said to him, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. He said, no razor has ever been used on my head because I have been a Nazirite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, come back once more. He has told me everything. After putting him to sleep, Delilah called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of Samson's hair and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. See, after all this nagging, after all this asking questions, Samson finally gives in. I don't know if he's just tired of it. He's like, just stop bugging me, woman. But eventually, he tells her the secret to his strength. And what does she do? Just like the other times. She calls in the Philistines, and this time he's told her the truth, and he loses all his strength. See, Delilah, she used every tactic that she could. She nagged him. She kept asking him questions over and over and over again. She was like, Samson, if you really loved me, then you would do this. How many of you guys have ever pulled that line before? Mom, if you really loved me, you would pick me up some Starbucks and bring it to me right now at school. You would take me out of school, actually, just so I can go home. She uses that line, she uses that tactic on him because she knows that she has influence over his life. She knows that she has some sort of power so that her words can get to him. She can get his secret out of him. See, Delilah didn't care what happened to Samson. She wasn't concerned with what would happen after the Philistines got him. All she cared about was herself. That was the only thing she was concerned with. And that leads me to my first point today. If you're taking notes on your outline, it's a blank there, is that your influence can be used to cause harm. Your influence can be used to cause harm. See, when you're only concerned about yourself, about making sure that you get what you want, your desires, oftentimes we can hurt people. Oftentimes we leave people in the dust and we don't even realize it. And this is something for me as a pastor that I constantly have to be aware of. Every time I step on this stage or up at Broadway, every time I'm on there, I have to recognize that people are looking to me. People see me as an example. Everything I say, everything I do, everything I post, people are looking. And so I have to be careful. And unfortunately, we see a lot of leaders and pastors making this mistake where they don't think about what their actions do. They don't think about their influence. And then they hurt a lot of people. And whether you realize it or not, you are a leader. People look to you. You have influence over someone. So are you using your influence to do good, or are you causing harm to other people? The second example that I have is another woman in the Bible. We love women in the Bible. Her name is Esther, and Esther was a good influence. Now, Esther was a Jew, and she was actually brought up by her cousin, Mordecai, and they were living in exile in Babylon along with a lot of other Jews. And once Esther's a little bit older, the king of Babylon, King Xerxes, he is looking for a new wife, for a queen. And so all these women are brought in for him to choose from, and Esther is one of them. And I don't have time to go through the whole story right now, but I encourage you to read the book of Esther on your own. It's a super great story. It's very interesting. I encourage you to do that on your own time. But basically, after this whole long process, Esther is finally chosen to be the queen, to be the king's wife. But the thing is, there's this guy named Haman. Haman is one of the nobles of the king. He's pretty high up there, and he has some beef with the Jews. He has some beef with Mordecai. Yeah, that's right. He's a thumbs down. And Haman decides to go to the king, and he kind of manipulates him into signing this order to basically kill off all of the Jews. Can you imagine if you were just upset with someone and then you decided that you were just going to kill off their whole family? Like, kind of an extreme reaction, right? But Haman gets this order signed, and Mordecai finds out about it. So Mordecai goes to Esther, and he tells her what's happened. He said, Esther, your people are going to be killed. The king has just signed an order for all of them to be put to death. And he tells her, you need to talk to the king. You need to let him know what is happening. You need to stop this order from going through. And I love what he says. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Esther 4:14, he says, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Mordecai is pointing out here that Esther has influence over the king and over the kingdom. She's in this royal position where she has influence for a reason. And he's saying, maybe this is why. Maybe this is why you were chosen, just so that you could save your people. Esther was in a position of influence. The only problem is, at that time, if someone showed up to the king without an invitation, without being summoned, they were immediately put to death. It was like, you came in, he was like, I didn't invite you, and then you're gone. And so Esther hadn't actually been summoned in over a month, so she's getting kind of worried. She's like, does the king even like me anymore? Does he even want to see me, or am I just supposed to stay in this corner over here? And so potentially going to the king without an invitation to bring this information to him, it could have cost her life. But I love what she says. Even knowing this, knowing that it could cost her, Esther says, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. She's willing to do this to save her people. And you can read the rest of the story in the Bible. But basically, she ends up going to the king and telling him, hey, Haman has made you sign this thing to kill all the Jews. I am a Jew myself, and I'm asking you to stop this order from happening. And basically, Haman is killed. The Jews are all saved. None of them are put to death. It's a happy ending. But the point that I want to get across is that Esther used her position of influence not for herself. She was risking her life. Going into that room without an invitation, she could have been killed on the spot. She had the power to either save the Jews or to save herself, and she chose others. She was more concerned with the Jews than her own well-being, which is the exact opposite of how Delilah was. Which leads me to my second point for today, is that your influence can be used to help others. Your influence can be used to help others. See, like I said before, people look to you, whether you realize it or not. Your younger siblings, your little cousins, your family, your friends, the people who follow you on Instagram, even if you don't feel like you have a lot of people that you're leading or who are following you, there is definitely a couple people in your life who are looking to you and are following your influence. And you have the power to point them in the right direction or to lead them astray. You have the power to help them or to cause them harm. You can use your influence to point them to Jesus or point them the other way. So which are you doing? How are you going to use your influence to help? See, both Delilah and Esther, they had influence on other people, but they used it very differently. And one of the things that we can learn from their story is not only how they influenced others, but also how we're influenced ourselves. See, Delilah, she was a bad influence on Samson, but she's not the only one to blame here. Samson chose to let Delilah in his circle. He knew that she wasn't good news. He knew that he wasn't supposed to be with her, that it was against his vow. He knew that he shouldn't share his secret with her, but he did anyways. He was just so infatuated with her. Oh, well, it's not that bad, she's good to be around. I know that she's not the best influence. We make all these excuses for people when really they are a negative influence in our lives. And that's ultimately what led to Samson's downfall. Esther, on the other hand, had good people in her life. She had Mordecai, her cousin, pouring into her, telling her, this is what you need to do, giving her strength, encouraging her, telling her to take the risks even if she was scared. And I think we need more people like Mordecai in our lives. We need more people who challenge us, who push us to our greatest potential, even if it's hard. Do you have a Mordecai in your life? Proverbs 13:20 says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. See, Samson, he had potential. He had this great calling on his life, but he didn't live up to it because of the people that he let into his life, because of the bad influences that he had around him. But Esther, she was able to live up to her potential because of the good influences that she had in her life, because of the people that she had pouring into her. And that brings me to my next point, which is that who you let in can either push you forward or pull you back. Who you let in can either push you forward or pull you back. With Delilah, she held Samson back from all the great things that he could have done. His life ended pretty sadly because he let her in. But with Esther, she was able to do even more than she thought possible because she had people pouring into her, because she had good influences in her circle. So who are you letting in your life? Who has a say over what you do? Who has authority in your life? What kind of influences do you have around you? Think about it. Lastly, I want to look at one more example. And this is of Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate influencer. No one can top him. No one is above him. And during his short time on earth, he had tons of followers. People would flock to him. There would be thousands around him just waiting to hear what he had to say. People were just trying to touch his cloak so that they could be healed by him. He had a lot of influence. And we can see this especially in the lives of his disciples, people who met him and then just dropped everything to follow him. People who, went on in their lives to devote their entire life to being for him, to sharing the gospel, to bringing the good news to other people, even to their death, because he was someone worth following. Are you? Are you worth following? Jesus used his influence not to puff himself up, not to make himself look great, not to gain popularity, but to point to God. To point to the fact that God is a God of mercy and grace, to teach people what it is to live righteously. And oftentimes, this meant that he went against the crowd. Oftentimes, this meant that he taught things that were controversial. He didn't do what was trendy, what everyone else was doing. He had to do the things that maybe people didn't agree with. And this didn't end with fame or fortune for him. He didn't end up with a ton of followers on Instagram. No, this ended with him on a cross. Because just like any influencer, Jesus had haters. And his haters wanted nothing more than to see him fail. They wanted nothing more than to see him be humiliated in the worst way possible, so they killed him on a cross. But Jesus, he didn't stop it from happening. He didn't fight against them. Because he used his influence not to save himself, not to look out for his own well-being, but to save you. He had you in mind when he was up there. And I think that this sets the example for us of what a real influencer looks like. If you're taking notes, this is the last point. And it's that being an influencer requires sacrifice. It requires sacrifice. It's not about sponsorships or money or popularity. It's not about how many followers that you can get. No, Jesus shows that the ultimate influencer, he shows that it's about laying down our desires and putting others first. It's not about making yourself great or having a bunch of people follow your lead. It's about sacrifice. I want you to think about the people that you have influence over, the people in your circle. And trust me, no matter who you are, you have influence over someone. Doesn't matter how old you are, what school you go to, what position you are in, you have influence. So are you using your influence to harm or to help? Are you using your influence to point people to Jesus or away? Are you positively affecting people's lives or are you negatively affecting their lives? Think about it. And are you willing to take the risks? Are you willing to make the sacrifices that being an influencer actually takes? Because this isn't a one-time commitment. Being an influencer doesn't just last when you're on a stage. It's a lifetime calling. It's every day, wherever you are, whoever you're with. Matthew 5:16 says, "Let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Let your light shine before others. This is a calling for everyone. So are you ready to step into that calling? Because I can tell you, it's not necessarily going to be easy. It requires some sacrifice. It requires taking some risks. It requires maybe going against the crowd, not always doing what's trendy. And are you willing to step into that? If we look at Jesus, today he is still the most famous person to have ever lived. And this is 2,000 years after his death. He's still changing lives. People are still giving their all to follow him. That's why we have things like Archetype. That's why we gather, because our lives have been changed by Jesus, and he has had an influence over us. And Jesus didn't come for fame. He didn't come to have a bunch of followers. He didn't come for popularity. He came for you. To him, it was worth it to die on that cross. To him, it was worth it to suffer and to be mocked and humiliated. He did it for you because he wanted a relationship with you. He wanted to be close to you. And if you're here and you haven't made that step to be in a relationship with him, if you've never made that decision before, I want to encourage you, don't wait. Don't wait until it's convenient. Don't wait until you feel a little bit more comfortable. God wants you to step into a life with him right now.